and leadership in the workplace. Want to know how to engage your people and turn into a company that everyone loves? Here's Dan on how to be more effective and to find that way to success.
Let me see a quick show of hands. How many of you are in sales? How many salespeople do we have here? Quite a lot of you. Very good. Okay. Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing because something there was a prediction not long ago that salespeople wouldn't be needed anymore. That the internet, and you're laughing at this, which is good because it's wrong. That salespeople wouldn't be needed anymore, that the internet and communications technology would make them obsolete. But if you look at the labor markets around the world, we have a lot of salespeople. There are a huge number of salespeople. Let's take a look at the charts. In the EU, you take the whole EU labor market, you have about 13% of the European Union labor force is in sales. 13%, that's a lot of people. You go to the UK. UK is about 1 in 10 people in the labor market in sales. You go to the United States, we've got about 1 in 9. You go to Japan, we've got about 1 in 8. All right, and so if you look at, it's very interesting, if you look at the labor markets of the world, they seem to converge around this number. See that? See how that triangle is sort of the same size all the time? It seems like, which is a big relief to many of you, that economies need a certain number of people whose job it is to sell stuff, to sell products, to sell services. Okay, so we need a lot of salespeople, and again, I think it's so interesting, it seems like it's all revolving around that number. Now, however, I want to talk a little bit more right now about the people who are in that gray area of that pie chart. The people in the gray area of that pie chart. Those of you who did not raise your hand, because I believe that I have a hunch at least that all of you are also in sales. It's a little bit of a paradox that those of you who are not in sales are actually in sales. That was my hunch. Now, in this world that we live in, as some of what you've heard yesterday, hunches are helpful, but data is better. Hunches are helpful, but data is better. So I went out and did some quantitative research on this question in the United States, but I think the findings reach to the rest of the world. I put together a sample of about 7,000 adult full-time workers in the U.S. 7,000 people in the United States workforce to reflect the whole diversity of the U.S. workforce by what people did for a living, by where they lived, by how much education they had, by whether they worked for a small firm or a large entity. And we asked them a bunch of questions, including this question right here. What percentage of your work involves convincing or persuading people to give up something they value for something you can offer? Think about that for a moment. What percentage of your work involves convincing or persuading people to give up something they value for something you can offer? Okay? Now this is what sales is. Can you tell me your first name? Massimo. Okay, so here's Massimo in the front row. Let's say that Massimo wanted to buy a car, and I was selling Massimo a car. He would give me a whole bunch of euros, I would give him a car. We would make that exchange, and we would both be better off at the end of that exchange. And my hunch, again, it's just a hunch, was that those kinds of exchanges are taking place inside of the workplace. That those kinds of exchanges are taking place inside of the workplace. So think about this question for yourself. Think about this question for yourself. Does anybody want to say the percentage of their own time? Anybody want to volunteer? You can just pretend you're American and shout it out unasked by anybody. So we had 80%, I heard, 70%. All right, so this is what we're trying to do. I'm trying to get people to think about their work in a slightly different way. And what we found in this sample of the American population, when we asked people this question, we got an average of 41%. People were spending about 40% of their time on the job selling. But it's a different kind of selling. All right? They're not selling a car to Massimo. They're doing something a little bit different. It's selling with a twist. They're selling, but money's not changing hands. They're selling, but the denomination isn't dollars or euros or yen or pesos. It is time, effort, attention, energy, zeal, commitment, belief. 40% of our time, that's a lot of time. Think about what this is. This is what I call non-sales selling. It's selling with a different denomination and where money's not changing hands. It's a boss saying to her employees, do this different thing or do this thing in a different way. That's selling. It's an individual going to his boss and saying, boss, give me some resources so I can do my job a little bit better. That's selling. It's going to a meeting and pitching your idea. That's selling. 40% of our time on average. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. 40% of an hour is 24 minutes. 24 minutes of every hour. Every hour of every day. In this thing that I call, in English, non-sales selling. Selling with a twist. So, if you look at the labor markets around the world, you've got a certain number of people in sales. You look at the rest of us, if we rethink what we do on our job, we're selling all the time. It leads us to this conclusion right here, which is this. Like it or not, we're all in sales.
Enjoying the show? Stay tuned for more from World Business Forum.